The city of Frisco, Texas, was electric. More than 10,000 fans had packed themselves into the arena, their voices rising like a thunderstorm before the first bell even rang. All of them united by one singular desire, to witness history being made by one of their own. Jesse "Bam" Rodriguez had become more than a boxer in this part of the world. He was a symbol, a walking testament to what relentless dedication, razor-sharp instinct, and an unshakable belief in yourself could produce. And on this night, with the lights blazing and the crowd roaring his name, Bam was about to face one of the most technically disciplined and frustratingly elusive challengers of his young but already extraordinary career. Phumelela Cafu, the African champion, had made the long journey from South Africa with a game plan, a point to prove, and absolutely nothing to lose. From the opening seconds, it was unmistakably clear that Cafu had not arrived in Texas merely to participate. He had arrived to complicate things. A natural counterpuncher by trade, Cafu positioned himself carefully from the very first exchange, planting himself in deliberate spots around the ring, keeping his guard tight and his eyes locked onto Rodriguez's every movement. He wasn't throwing wildly or looking for the knockout he knew was unlikely to come early. Instead, he was calculating, studying, waiting for Bam to make the kind of aggressive overreach that a fighter of Rodriguez is attacking. Brilliance occasionally risked. The strategy was clear to anyone watching closely. Make Bam come forward, make him commit, and then punish him on the way in with that lethal counter left hook that had defined so much of Cafu's career up to this point. What made the early rounds so fascinating was how much Rodriguez respected that strategy. Bam is not a fighter who simply overwhelms opponents with reckless power. He is instinctive, yes, but there is an intelligence to his aggression that separates him from ordinary punchers. His trainers had done their homework. They had studied Cafu's fights, identified the patterns, and walked into this arena knowing exactly what was coming. They told Rodriguez before the bout that Cafu's best punch was that right hand, short, compact, deceptively fast, and that the surest path to victory ran directly through the body. So from the earliest exchanges, Rodriguez began threading body shots into his combinations with surgical precision, looking to break down the African champion's structure and slowly strip away the defensive discipline that Cafu had built his reputation upon through the opening rounds. It was Cafu who arguably won the chess match more often than not, even if he wasn't winning the rounds in any convincing way. He kept Rodriguez from getting the angles he craved. Every time Bam attempted to shift his weight and move to Cafu's left side, that vulnerable corridor that opens naturally against Southpaw fighters, Cafu was already reading the movement, already throwing that left hook to cut off the angle and reset the geometry of the fight. It was intelligent, disciplined boxing from a man who understood that staying alive in a fight against a talent like Rodriguez required constant mental engagement. You could see the respect Rodriguez had for the danger Cafu represented, the slightly cautious way he was picking his shots rather than letting his combinations flow with their usual freedom. But body shot by body shot, the narrative of the fight began to tilt. Rodriguez landed a clean right hand straight to the midsection that drew an audible reaction from ringside, and in those moments you could see the first cracks beginning to form in Cafu's composure. A fighter absorbs punishment to the body differently than punishment to the head. Headshots can be shaken off. Adrenaline can mask the immediate impact, but body shots accumulate with a cruelty that is almost geological. Slow at first, then sudden and overwhelming. Bam understood this. His corner understood this. Every time Cafu reset his guard and prepared to throw that counter left hook, Rodriguez was already targeting the ribs, the solar plexus, the soft tissue beneath the rib cage, where even the most disciplined champion eventually begins to feel their legs grow heavy. There was a moment midway through the fight that seemed to crystallize everything about Cafu's predicament. He had Bam backed into a corner, his most advantageous position, the spot from which a counterpuncher dreams of operating. But instead of unleashing, instead of loading up on that right hand and making Rodriguez pay for the moment of retreat, Cafu paused. He hesitated. The crowd noticed it, the commentators noticed it, and perhaps most importantly, Rodriguez noticed it. That brief, uncertain pause told a story that no scorecard could fully capture. Cafu was a man operating at the absolute edge of his capabilities, doing everything right technically, but lacking that final, ruthless ingredient that separates very good fighters from genuine champions. He was dancing with the idea of greatness without ever fully committing to the leap. Rodriguez, for his part, never stopped working. Even in rounds where the exchanges were tight and the scoring was genuinely close, Bam was always building toward something. He was using the jab to measure distance, throwing that right uppercut to test Cafu's guard, watching for the moments when the left hook came just slightly late or just slightly off. His trainers screamed instructions from the corner about rolling under those hooks, about making Cafu pay to the body anytime he threw, about using the pivot and the footwork that had bewildered Carlos Cuadras in one of the most celebrated performances of Bam's career. And gradually, beautifully, the performance began to open up like a flower responding to morning light. The uppercut became Bam's most compelling weapon as the middle rounds wore on. Cafu's guard typically impenetrable in the early going, was beginning to drift slightly in the moments following body shots, and Rodriguez had been studying those micro windows with the patience of a craftsman. When the opening appeared, even briefly, Bam was threading that short right uppercut through the gap between Cafu's gloves and catching him clean to the chin. Not hard enough to end matters dramatically, not yet, but hard enough to announce that the fight was shifting irrevocably in one direction. The crowd in Frisco felt it. They roared with each landed uppercut, each combination that found its target, understanding instinctively that their man was turning the corner. What the scorecard told at the midpoint of the fight, 5 rounds to 1 in favor of Rodriguez, was really only half the story. The numbers suggested a comfortable lead, but the feeling inside the arena was more complex than comfortable. Cafu was not a broken man. He had not been dropped, had not been badly hurt, had not abandoned the technical framework that had brought him all the way to Texas with a legitimate shot at an upset. He was still throwing that left hook on the counter, still using his footwork to deny Rodriguez the angles, still responding to big shots with sharp right hands of his own that reminded everyone watching that he was a former champion for a reason. The fight was competitive in the way that a chess match between two skilled players is competitive. One player ahead on material, but the game's still very much alive. But there is a quiet devastation in watching a fighter slowly run out of answers. Cafu had come to Texas with a plan, had executed it with more discipline than perhaps even his own corner had expected, and had made Jesse Rodriguez work harder for his points than most people in that building had anticipated. Yet the gap between a great performance and a winning performance is sometimes immeasurable, and as the championship rounds loomed on the horizon, it became increasingly evident that Cafu was heading toward a loss unless something extraordinary happened. The body work was mounting. Rodriguez's combinations were landing with greater frequency and greater force. The defensive guard that Cafu had maintained so admirably in the early rounds was no longer as tight, no longer as immediate in its response. In the later rounds, Rodriguez stepped on the gas in a way that brought the Frisco faithful to their feet. The 4, 5, 6 punch combinations that had been shortened and disciplined through the middle stages of the fight now began to open up fully. Bam, letting his hands go with the kind of flowing freedom that had made him one of the most thrilling young champions in the sport. There were moments of genuine danger for Cafu, moments where the corner may well have contemplated stopping the contest if their fighter continued, absorbing the kind of punishment that comes when a master boxer finally stops respecting the danger and starts asserting his full power and presence. The crowd was deafening in those exchanges, the energy in the building reaching the kind of fever pitch that only a live championship fight can generate. Cafu, to his enormous credit, never stopped competing. That is perhaps the most honest thing you can say about his performance on this night. He never stopped. He was outworked, outboxed, and gradually overwhelmed by a fighter operating at a level above his own. But he refused to surrender, refused to give the referee or his own corner a reason to call a halt to proceedings. Every time Rodriguez landed a big right hand or a clean uppercut, Cafu responded. Every time the crowd erupted and the momentum seemed to be building toward a dramatic finish, Cafu threw something back. His conditioning was immaculate. The man wasn't even breathing heavily in rounds, when other fighters would have been gasping, and his heart was beyond question. He simply wasn't quite good enough on this particular night to solve the puzzle that Jesse Rodriguez presented.